Now, as the European Union maintains its leadership on a global stage, discussion about competitiveness is on the forefront, with Poland set to become the rotating presidency of the European Union. Of course, it's more important than ever to discuss this with our next guest. Now, joining us today on TVP World is Magdalena Sobkowiak Czarnecka to tell us more about the taking leadership of the European Union. Now, can we first start by the most recent statement from the Polish Prime Minister, who's talked about the immigration strategy that drew a lot of ire in the beginning, but then have since then been finding a lot of allies within the European Union. Do you think Donald Tusk has just probably said the part that most European leaders are actually looking to say out loud?
The message was clear that the strategy that we had for the years 2015-16, you remember the migration crisis in the EU. We had lots of migrants on Lampedusa, on the south coast of European Union, and at that time we had a strategy of relocation. We had the strategy for people who are actually fleeing out of the countries which were the war zones. But the Polish message for now is that what we have on Polish-Belarusian border, it's absolutely different case. This is a part of the hybrid war. We are under pressure of the hybrid war, and those people who are turning up on the Polish-Belarusian border, these are people who are steered by Lukashenko, by Putin, and it's a different case, and we cannot compare those two facts. And to be honest, when I was traveling around Europe, since I'm Undersecretary of State in the Prime Minister's office responsible for European affairs, and when I was asking my colleagues about the situation of Polish-Belarusian border, even if I remember we had one meeting in Budapest just 2 days after Mateusz Sitek was killed, the Polish soldier, and they had absolutely no idea. They thought it's a part of the issue of migration, and it's not. It's a part of hybrid war. And to be honest, I'm not surprised about the reaction of European leaders, since we remember the situation in 2014 when Russia has annexed Crimea, and Poland was the one to ring the bell in Brussels. And the answer from other member states was, should we really put sanctions on Putin? Maybe it's not so bad. And now what we hear from our colleagues in Europe, and even from Ursula von der Leyen, she is making a straight message. We should have listened to you earlier. So what I read from the European Council and the agreement around the proposal of Prime Minister Tusk is that now Europe decides to put Poland in the steering role of the whole process against Russia.
Right, like I said, perhaps Poland is living through some of the longest and most excruciating "I told you so" in history, and perhaps it is time for the European Union to start turning to this side of the aisle and listen to what
just one more sentence, that if somebody has a doubt, do we are nice to migrants here in Poland, let's just repeat that we have here in Poland about 2 million migrants from Ukraine, and you have them in schools, they are working, they are part of the society. So we are the best example how we can treat migrants here in Poland, and the situation on Polish-Belarusian border, it's a completely different issue.
Speaking of taking a leadership role, now we do know that in about 80 days, Poland is going to take the rotating presidency. And how can we expect this Polish presidency going forward? What are some of the things that are in store? What can we look forward to?
The main slogan of the Polish presidency is security. And we here propose security in 6 dimensions. The first one is the military security, which of course had much in common about the war in Ukraine. Also the developing defense industry in Europe. The second pillar is the energy security, which means being not dependent on different sources of energy, the sources from outside of EU. The third pillar is economic security, and here we have to give answers for the question about the future of cohesion policy. Since after COVID, there's big discussion going on in EU. Should we again put the milestones, put the system like Recovery EU, or should we go back to the cohesion policy that we knew before COVID? So that's the first issue. The second one is the future of the new MFF. The new MFF should be on the table during Polish presidency. The fourth pillar is the security of food safety security, which of course is connected with the Green Deal. And for me, the main message here in this pillar is about the climate security and food supply security. I'm against putting on two different corners agriculture and people who are fighting for climate, for Earth. I think they have everything in common. At the end of the day, we need to have something to eat, we need to have fresh air, and this is the final, the end game of those both groups. The fifth pillar is about security of the health, and here we talk about pharmaceutical act that we should be here, we have should be independent in the terms of supply of the medicaments, and the other issue is the mental health of young people. And the sixth, last but not the least, I think most important for you, it's the security of information, fighting with disinformation, with fake news, and which is obviously part of the hybrid war.
Right. And speaking of the Green Deal, the discussion around it seemed to have died down a little bit. Can you tell us what happened with it?
It has, because we've done some changes as Poland already, that Prime Minister Tusk was making an intervention in the Commission. Now we are waiting for the new European Commission. That's the moment that we are now in Europe. At the beginning of November, we will have the hearings of the candidates for the commissioners. So I expect the new Commission to be in place in the office around beginning of December. So just before Polish presidency.
Right. And speaking of changes, of course, we did see a change of government for the past year. How would you assess this year of governance by the newly elected Polish government?
I would mostly assess it through my file, so through the European affairs. I think the biggest achievement is the end of Article 7 procedure. We are no longer under rule of law plus procedure. We were the first country in EU to be under this procedure, and now we are the first country in EU to end the procedure. So that is definitely the success. What we've been doing also, we are implementing the directives which the previous government was not doing. What I'm really interested in is the women's rights, and we are implementing two directives about women's rights. The first one is about the pay gap, so the difference between the earnings of men and women. The second one is about women on boards, so having women or less represented gender in the board. So this is also very important. So in the European affairs, we are moving forward, and Prime Minister Tusk now has a leading role in the EU.
Great. And when it comes to competitiveness, because this is some of the topic that has been dominating the discussion in these panels, what can you tell us, what are some of the challenges and some of the advantage that Europe has when it comes to competitiveness?
I would say here we have two most tasks, the biggest task. The first one, and is also connected with Polish presidency, we should first do the scanning of the laws that we have already on the table, and then decide should we need something more, because what we see in Europe, we have too much regulation on the table. The second issue, which comes from the reports of Draghi and Letta, is that inside of the EU, the member states, they understand competitiveness as a competitiveness between the member states, not as Europe as a whole and between the rest of the world. And upcoming US elections, we will see what will happen in Washington, but if Trump will come, then we will have the protectionism. But if Kamala Harris will be in the office, I think the next decision ahead of EU is the decision, should we play more with US or more with China, because I find now the EU somewhere between. I would expect that we will make now here the agreement with US. Maybe we should come back to the idea of TTIP, which was 10 years ago. But everything after the US elections.
Right, a lot still hinges on which way the wind blows, but like you mentioned, some of the criticism levied at the European Union is the regulation making it very hard to compete in an international arena. Are there any perhaps plans or any changes that's being suggested, perhaps a new EU approach when it comes to these regulations?
I think the issue that we should concern of is the regulations about the climate, because the climate regulations cannot kill the competitiveness on the European Union. This is also the issue of CBAM, that for me, that's a very good regulation, because we cannot close our eyes that we are not producing here CO2 in Europe and we move it outside of and we still do the harm to the climate and earth. So this is one of the tasks, but firstly do the scanning, how many acts we have on the table, should they really be in place, should we change something, and then think about big regulations. The big acts are already on the table. The AI Act, the Pharmaceutical Act, the Migration Pact, they are already done. What we should do as a presidency is some kind of a scanning. Of course, we were against, as a country, against the Migration Pact, and we are still against. But about the AI Act, should now, during the presidency, we will do some kind of a scanning, how it's going on here in the EU.
Right, so it does look like there's a very robust roadmap for what to do going forward when it comes to the European Union as well as Poland's next upcoming EU rotating presidency. Thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
And thank you for watching this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.